with Modern Guild. I'm pleased to be here to present the Interviewing 301 module. In this 35-minute workshop, we'll be going beyond the interview basics to help you develop your interview skills and become an attractive candidate in the interview process. Agenda. We'll begin with interview logistics. This is going to include a review of interview types and also methods in which you're being interviewed. We'll also take a look at who will be interviewing you. Next, we'll review how to effectively prepare yourself for interviews. We'll then dive into common interview questions, and I'm going to provide you with tips to formulate winning responses to traditional, behavioral, and case interview questions. We'll also review when and how to best follow up after your interview. And finally, I'll provide you tips for dealing with interview nerves. Let's get started with interview logistics. There are 3 types of interviews. First, traditional interviews, where you'll be asked a series of traditional interview questions about you, your experience, your career objectives, as well as the job, the company, and the industry in which you're interviewing for. Second is behavioral interviews, where you'll be asked to describe your behavior in past situations or how you handled past situations. And this is all based on the premise that past performance is the most accurate predictor of future performance. And third, case style, which is common in certain industries such as consulting. And in case style interviews, the candidate is presented with a problem or a case and must work through the problem during the interview. We're going to be spending time going more in depth on these 3 types of interviews a little bit later in the workshop. How are you being interviewed? Before you even get to an actual interview, keep in mind that you're being evaluated in all of the communication that you have with employers. This often may start with email correspondence. So remember to always put your best foot forward and be professional in all your interactions. The first interview is often a phone interview. And this is usually a screening interview to determine who's going to move on in the interview process. In the phone interview, you're going to be asked a series of set questions, and phone interviews are usually brief, not longer than 30 minutes. The benefit to phone interviews is that you can have your resume in front of you, you can have the job description in front of you, and even pull up the company website if you'd like to. Where you do your phone interview is crucial. You'll want to make sure that you find a quiet place completely free of distractions and where you get cell phone reception. And make sure that your phone is completely charged before you start your phone interview. The second type of interview would be a Skype or video interview. And these are becoming very common, especially when candidates aren't in the same geographic location as an employer. The great news for you is that you're getting a lot of professional Skype experience in your Modern Guild program, including your mock interviews, interacting with your career coach, and doing your informational interviews with industry experts. So be sure to ask for feedback from your career coach about how you're presenting yourself on Skype. You want to be sure that your interviewer can see the image that you intend. So check the lighting, make sure your webcam is set up correctly, and of course you'll want to be dressed appropriately. And remember the nonverbals like making eye contact and being aware of your posture. And last would be the in-person interview. And this likely is going to include a one-on-one interview. And the length of the in-person interview really varies. It could be an all-day event, or it could take place over the course of a few days, or it may just be a couple of hours. For the in-person interview, make sure you do your homework on the person or people that you'll be interviewing with. Recruiters really like it when students do their research and ask questions based on this. And LinkedIn is a really great tool to help you with this type of research, and we're going to touch on this in just a few minutes. Building rapport with your interviewer is incredibly important. And to do this, you really need to make sure that your personality is shining through. Sometimes students tense up during interviews and their personality goes completely flat. And sometimes this is due to nerves. And we're going to discuss tips for dealing with nerves toward the end of the workshop. For your in-person interview, be sure to prepare your logistics in advance. Give yourself plenty of time to get to your interview. You never know if there's going to be traffic or a delayed metro, so make sure that you arrive 5 to 10 minutes early. Who is interviewing you? Before your resume even gets in the hands of a person, you may be screened by applicant tracking software. You may or may not be familiar with applicant tracking software. Many large organizations use this type of software to narrow their candidate pool, and the government is one of them. The software scans your resume for keywords that fit the job description. So in order to be sent to a recruiter, you need to be flagged by this software. Therefore, your resume needs to be tailored as best as it can to the position, specifically your skills and experience. There's a good chance that your first interview will be with a recruiter. The recruiter is going to be assessing your fit for the position and likely interviewing many candidates to decide which applicants to send to the supervisor or the hiring manager. Next, the supervisor or the department director. This interview will be more in depth than your interview with the recruiter. The supervisor is going to go deeper into your skills and your experiences. The supervisor also is going to be assessing the personality fit. Next, peers or search committee. So you may be interviewing with your potential future peers or a search committee consisting of a supervisor, peers, or individuals outside of the department. Peers also are going to be assessing your qualifications and the personality fit. Make sure you ask for business cards of everyone you meet with so that you can easily follow up after your interview. Next, we'll move on to how to effectively prepare for your interviews. There are 3 things you must know when preparing for your interview: the company, yourself, and your resume. First, the company. This involves doing your homework and memorizing some of the basics. Some key facts you want to know include a basic company overview, such as the age, size, structure, the company's geographic location. Is it a public, private, or nonprofit organization? Also, who are the organization's competitors? What are the names of key executives? What is the organization's mission? What are the products and/or services offered by the company? What are potential career paths within this organization? So how do you go about researching the company? Well, there's a wide variety of resources available to you. A good place to start would be the Modern Guild Knowledge Center. Also, spend time on the company's website. And I'd also recommend checking out and following the company on LinkedIn, which we'll elaborate on in just a moment. Stay informed by reading credible news publications. I'd also encourage you to take advantage of your campus career center resources. A good one that comes to mind is the vault.com, and that provides detailed industry and company information. On-campus employer information sessions can also be incredibly informative. And lastly, get smart on current events. Be sure you're up to date with happenings in your field. A tip that I have for you is to utilize a tool called Google Alerts. Google Alerts will enable you to automatically be notified when new content matches the terms that you've inputted. So for example, if you have an interview coming up with Bloomingdale's, Bloomingdale's could be used as your keyword to stay up to date with latest company news at Bloomingdale's. This is a great passive way to stay up to date with the industry as well as companies that you have interviews coming up with. And as I mentioned earlier, you also want to take the time to research your interviewers. This is going to allow you to not only ask good questions, but also show that you've gone above and beyond in your research. LinkedIn is an excellent tool to help you with your research. I recently spoke with a recruiter at a Fortune 500 company who said she links in with everyone that she interviews with, either before or after the interview. But she loves when students beat her to it because it proactively demonstrates their interest in the position. Let's take a more detailed look at LinkedIn. If you aren't familiar with LinkedIn, it is a professional networking site, somewhat similar to Facebook, but professional networking as opposed to social networking. If you're not on LinkedIn, I highly recommend that you get started just by creating a basic profile and connecting with people that you already know. As we heard, recruiters are utilizing LinkedIn in their recruiting process. What you're looking at on your screen is the company page for Apple. And I found it by typing the company name in the search bar that you see in the upper right-hand corner. You may also follow the company to stay up to date with happenings at the organization by clicking follow right below the search bar. You'll also see on the right a section entitled How You're Connected. Here you'll see the connections that you have at the company. So if you look at my connections for Apple, I have one first-degree connection, meaning one of my contacts works at Apple. If I happen to have an interview with Apple, I absolutely should get in touch with this contact first to pick his brain about the company, to possibly get insight into the interview process, and perhaps this person is willing to put in a good word for me or recommend me. I also have 91 second-degree connections, meaning they are contacts of my connections, and you're welcome to request an introduction to these people. Then you'll see that there are over 65,000 employees on LinkedIn. This is a huge number, so in order to find your interviewers, I'd suggest entering their names in the search bar individually. And on the individual's page, you're going to be able to gain insight into his or her career path, background, skills, and their current role at the company. An example of how LinkedIn has been of benefit to a student that I worked with recently. So ultimately, the student utilized LinkedIn to help her land her summer internship with a nonprofit organization in her hometown. So she used LinkedIn to help her research nonprofits in her area. And she noticed one of her high school classmates' sister happened to work at one of the organizations that she was interested in. And her classmate gladly connected the two on LinkedIn. And after a few LinkedIn correspondence, they decided to schedule an informational interview. And they ended up having a great meeting, and the student learned more about the organization and the structure of the organization, and also learned that the organization typically takes summer interns. And she'll be interning in the communications department this summer, which she is absolutely thrilled about. So this just goes to show you how beneficial networking, and specifically professional networking via LinkedIn, can be to you. Yourself. Your job during the interview is to sell yourself as the best candidate for the job. You must know your key strengths and be able to align these strengths to relevant experiences. A recruiter friend recently told me one of her biggest pet peeves is when students say that they're good at something but have no evidence to back it up. For example, I'm good at sales, period. This definitely doesn't cut it in the interview. You need to have evidence to prove that you're good at sales. Know what value you are to an employer. The Value Proposition Builder is an assignment that will be completed in both the exploration and immersion phases. This assignment, along with your career coach conversations, will help you to articulate your experience, skills, and value. Third, your resume. Remember, anything on your resume is fair game during your interview. Be prepared to discuss everything. If you say that you're fluent in German, know that your interviewer could perhaps speak to you in German. Be sure to highlight your most relevant experiences for the job for which you're interviewing. If you're interviewing for a job at a nonprofit organization, you'll want to highlight relevant experiences, such as related internships, volunteer work, related extracurriculars, or coursework. Be ready to communicate your measurable achievements, as well as your key strengths, which we reviewed previously. Let's take a brief look at how you will be evaluated. Recruiters are taking into account a variety of factors when evaluating candidates. First, your experience. Do you have related experience? If so, how much and how valuable is your experience? One of your jobs during the interview is to prove the value of your experience by highlighting transferable skills that were gained. Next, are you worth investing in? The employer is investing time and money in you as an employee. You need to demonstrate that you can be developed and add value here. Next, your presentation, including dress, and your affect. Here, pay attention to your facial expressions and your body language. This is a benefit of doing something such as a recorded mock interview. You may notice things such as your body language that you've been completely unaware of. Often, when candidates are nervous, they may display nervous habits, such as hair twirling or clicking a pen. Once you know what your nervous tendencies are, they can easily be avoided. Also, your ability to engage in professional conversation. Remember to keep it professional. Don't talk negatively about past experiences or past supervisors. Also keep in mind that professional does not equal stiff. You want your personality to shine through during the interview. And last, your education. Where do you go to school? Your degree or intended degree? Your major, GPA, honors, academic achievements. And of course, remember that first impressions really do count. Here you'll see a list of the top qualities and skills desired by employers. Remember, it is key that you make the match between you and the job in which you're seeking. You need to demonstrate that you have the skills they are looking for in a candidate, and you're often going to find this right in the job description. I know I've mentioned this previously, but you must be prepared with examples that prove you have these skills. Taking the second skill as an example, oral communication skills. Perhaps you recently presented a project in class in which you received excellent feedback from both your classmates and your professor. Sharing the details of this experience would help you in demonstrating the skill, which we know will make much more of an impact than simply stating the skill. How to formulate winning responses to traditional, behavioral, and case interview questions. Let's move on to the real meat of your interview. First, expect there to be questions about you, such as, tell me about yourself. And we're going to touch on that one in the next slide. Also, what makes you unique? You must know what differentiates you from your peers. And the branding assignment in the Modern Guild curriculum is an excellent tool to help you think this through. How would your past supervisors or professors describe you? This is another opportunity to sell yourself and mention qualities that are going to appeal to that employer. Why should we hire you? This is a really common interview question. Another way of phrasing this would be, why you? We have so many candidates, why you? This is another way of asking, what makes you unique? Here you want to demonstrate both your strong interest in the position as well as what makes you stand out as a candidate. What are your greatest strengths or weaknesses? For the strengths part of this question, you'll want to name 3 relevant strengths. But in addition to naming the strengths, you want to provide evidence to back up the skill or the quality. So your time frame in answering this question would be about 90 seconds, definitely not less than a minute. I've heard a lot of students in their responses to this question simply name 3 qualities, but remember, you want to provide that supporting evidence. For the weaknesses question, this one tends to throw a lot of students, so it's one that you want to be prepared to discuss and probably rehearse it as well. Keep in mind that everybody has weaknesses in development areas, and employers know this. They like when candidates have the self-insight to identify their development areas. When responding to this question, keep in mind the 20-80 rule. You'll want to dedicate approximately 20% of your response to describing the weakness and focus 80% of your response on the steps that you're taking to overcome that weakness. Just make sure you don't highlight a skill that is essential for the job. Also, what motivates you? Employers really want to dig into your drive and motivation with this question and make sure that that aligns with the position. Let's take a more detailed look at tell me about yourself. Many interviews begin with this open-ended prompt, and you cannot just wing it. You want to engage and grab the attention of your interviewer. This isn't a time to go through a laundry list of your skills. Rather, you'll want to have a well-structured response that touches on a few main elements. On your screen, you'll see a 90-second framework for effectively responding to tell me about yourself. So first, you'll want to share any relevant personal information, such as where you're from. Also, you'll want to mention your academic experience, such as where you go to school, what you're studying, what is your major, minor. Also, if you studied abroad, this would be a great place to share. Next, your professional experience, so including any relevant internships, leadership activities, on-campus jobs, summer jobs, any extracurricular involvement that you have. Remember, this isn't everything that you've done, but you want to choose the most relevant experiences to highlight. An effective way to wrap up Tell Me About Yourself is to share why you're interested in the position. We're going to view a clip on the next slide of a candidate who effectively responds to Tell Me About Yourself.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Of course. I'm currently a junior at UNC Chapel Hill, double majoring in business and advertising. I now live in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, but I was really lucky enough to have an extensive international childhood, having lived in China, Japan, France, and the United States. This summer, I had the opportunity to return to China for 2 months, and I was able to both intern at a local company in Beijing and take a course at Peking University. I really grew from the experience and learned how to adapt and respond to unfamiliar situations, how to apply the knowledge I've learned in textbooks to real-life situations, and so much more. I'm really interested in your company because of your structured internship program, your international projects, and the fact that the top professionals of this field work for your company. My summer internship in Beijing can attest to the fact that I'm cross-functional and adaptive, and I know that I can create value for your company as an intern.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that.
You can also anticipate questions about your experience. And for students, experience may include academics, internships, jobs, extracurriculars, or volunteer work. Experience questions may include, what has been your greatest accomplishment? For this one, the accomplishment you choose, it should be professional, relevant, and somewhat recent. And ideally, it should pertain to the position that you're interviewing for. And for even more credibility, highlight the effort that you put forth in order to achieve the accomplishment. What was your most significant contribution to your last internship? Again, with this one, really try to tailor your response to what it is that you're interviewing for. This is a great opportunity to highlight transferable skills. When have you made a mistake or failed? Or what is a lesson you've learned from a previous job or internship? For this one, you want to be honest. However, don't reveal a mistake that was seriously detrimental. Similar to the weakness question, you want to concentrate on what you learned from the mistake to prove that you're capable of self-improvement. Therefore, briefly discuss a small, well-intentioned mistake and then elaborate on how it was rectified and what you've gained as a result. In what way have your studies prepared you for your career? This is another opportunity to highlight transferable skills. For example, your English major has likely helped you develop strong critical thinking and editing skills, among many others. You might want to check out your department's website to help you in identifying skill sets associated with your major. Then there are questions revolving around your work objectives, the job, the employer, as well as the industry. Focusing on your work objectives, why do you want to work here? Remember that employers want someone who is very enthusiastic about the job and the industry. Doing your company research is going to help you formulate this response. Describe your ideal work environment. Be sure that your response to this question reflects the nature of the organization. So if it were a Fortune 100 company, you'll want to convey that you enjoy large corporate environments. If it's a boutique firm, then emphasize your ability to thrive in an intimate work setting. Or if you know that the position requires extensive teamwork, you can describe your ideal work environment as one that's very collaborative. How do you like to be supervised? Maybe you like when your supervisor is open and honest with feedback, or is willing to make connections personally, or has an open door policy. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? For short-term goals, you'll want to focus on growing with the company, developing your skill sets, and perhaps even moving up with the company. Regardless of what it is, be sure that you relate your goals to the company. Why are you interested in this position? Similar to why you want to work here, but be as specific as possible about what aspects of this opportunity encouraged you to apply. What makes a successful human resource manager or marketing manager or whatever it is the position is? Focus on what skills are necessary, but most importantly, elaborate and tell me how you possess these skills. Remember the details. Tell me about a challenge facing our industry. The company and industry research that you do prior to your interview is going to help you with this question. As I mentioned earlier, make sure you're up to date with happenings in both the field and at the company. Behavioral interviewing. Behavioral interviewing is a very common method used by employers. So what is it and why is it used? Behavioral interviewing is a technique used by employers to learn more about your past behavior in a particular situation. The employer is trying to predict or gauge how you will respond to future situations. Behavioral interviewing is said to be 55% predictive of future on-the-job behavior, whereas traditional interviewing is approximately 10% predictive. You'll notice most interview questions aren't really questions, but prompts which you'll be responding to. You know you're getting a behavioral question when you're asked about a past experience. For example, give me an example of a time when you demonstrated good leadership skills. Tell me about a time you had to work with a difficult person. Tell me about a difficult problem you've faced recently and how you went about solving it. These are all examples of behavioral interview questions. So just how do you respond to these types of behavioral questions? The key is to be very specific, not vague or general. Give clear, specific examples of when you've demonstrated the requested behaviors or skills. A technique to provide you a good framework for answering behavioral interview questions is called the STAR method. So let's take a look at the acronym. S and T, situation and task. Describe the situation or task you were faced with. This is going to give the interviewer some context of what the situation looked like. A, action. Describe the action you took in that situation. R, results. What were the results of the action that you took? And these results should reflect positively on you. The results are what most students forget to highlight in their responses, and this is a really important aspect of your answer. When answering behavioral interview questions, you want to be sure that you're painting a clear picture of the scenario or example that you are providing. The focus should be on you and not others. Be sure to use I statements. Often students question, how long should my responses be? If you are hitting on all of these elements of the STAR method, your response should be approximately 1 to 2 minutes. You don't want to be talking longer than 2 minutes. In the next clip, you'll notice the candidate describe the situation, tell you the action that was taken, and then highlight the positive results of the action taken.
Kexon, why don't you tell me about a time when you worked in a group setting?
Yes. For a consulting class project, I once worked on a 5-person group tasked with helping a fitness center decide on whether or not to stay open. The project lasted about 2 months, and I was appointed as a team leader because of my organization and delegation skills. I took charge by organizing all the meetings and agendas. Ultimately, my team recommended for the company to maintain the fitness center and to launch a wellness program to increase the utilization rate. And the presentation included past studies, numbers on how much healthcare costs and cost of lost days a healthy employee can save in the long run, and so on. We ended up with a fantastic grade, and our feedbacks to each other, I received multiple comments on how my management strategies were really effective and kept the project on track. I was especially proud of this because my group members were all upperclassmen.
Wow, okay, great to hear.
Here you'll find examples of additional behavior interview questions. What is the most difficult situation you have ever faced? Tell me about a time you went above and beyond what was required of the position. Tell me about a time you had to complete a task or a project with a critical deadline. Tell me about a time you were given criticism. Tell me about a time you worked with a difficult person. Give me an example of a goal you reached and tell me how you achieved it. Utilizing the STAR framework in your responses to these questions will ensure you're covering all the important points of the scenario. The third type of interview that we're going to cover is case-style interviewing. What is it and why is it used? Typically, consulting firms use case-style interviewing to assess their candidates. However, any employer who's looking for strong problem-solving and presentation skills may utilize case-style interviewing. Problems or cases are presented to the candidate, and he or she must work through the case during the interview. Interviewers will be assessing how the candidate gets to the answer, not whether the candidate arrives at the correct answer. Employers use case-style interviewing to assess the candidate's analytical and problem-solving skills, listening skills, ability to organize and present information, and ability to perform under pressure. There are several types of case questions, including first, brain teasers, which are logic questions used to gauge creativity, quantitative, and problem-solving skills. A classic brain teaser is, why are manhole covers round? Then there are classic business case questions. And these questions are given to gauge how much general business knowledge candidates have and how they can logically apply this knowledge to business problems. An example of a business question is, an airline finds that while its revenues are high, the company is still operating at a loss. What's going on? There are several types of business questions which could be posed in areas such as profit and loss, like this one, organizational structure, and marketing. And last, there are guesstimates, in which a candidate uses logical deduction and general statistical information to answer the question. An example of a guesstimate would be, how many Starbucks are in New York City? Below are several tips for approaching case-style interviews. First, listen carefully and jot down notes as needed. Summarize the question, and if needed, clarify any points that you do not understand. Feel free to ask questions to get more information. Don't be afraid of silence. Take some time to think through your approach. Communicate your thought process clearly. Remember, you're being evaluated on your analytical and your presentation skills. Case interviews can be very challenging, and so practice is essential. In your Modern Guild program, you'll have the opportunity to practice case interviews during your live mock interviews if you choose. TheVault.com also has an excellent case-style interview guide that you might want to check out. Participating in case competitions can be tremendously effective as well, and usually you'll have that opportunity if your campus offers a consulting club. Also, attend employer information sessions, and last, connect with industry professionals to seek their advice. At the conclusion of your interviewer will ask if you have any questions. It is imperative that you have questions prepared in advance. Having good questions will help demonstrate your interest in the position, and it's an opportunity to show that you've done your company research. Have a minimum of 5 to 6 questions prepared just in case any of your questions are answered during the course of the interview. But plan to ask about 3 to 4 questions. Here you'll see several examples of questions for employers. What skills or attributes are you looking for in a candidate? What has been your career path within the organization? What is the most challenging aspect of this position? How would I be evaluated and how often? How does this department fit into the organization structure? What have been the department's successes in the past couple of years? How would you describe the company's culture? Let's move on to interview follow-up. Don't forget post-interview etiquette. So you've spent a lot of time preparing, you're feeling good about your interview performance. What comes next? The last step is one not to be skipped. First, be sure to collect the business cards of everyone you meet with during your interview. Having the individual's contact information is going to allow you to follow up with a thank you. Modern Guild highly encourages you to send a thank you within 24 hours of your interview. You should mail a handwritten thank you to your interviewers following every professional interview. Your thank you note should be written on plain stationery or simple thank you note cards. Please see the Knowledge Center on your MyGuild page to view a sample thank you letter. This is going to help you in developing the content of your thank you letter. The key is to personalize your thank you note, reference your discussion, and make sure to reiterate your interest in the position. And last, during your interview, you should have been informed of the hiring timeline or timeframe in which the employer will make a decision on a candidate. If this hasn't been shared, ask. If you find that you haven't heard back in the timeframe communicated to you, you should follow up with an email checking in on the status of the position and also reiterating your interest in the position. A good rule of thumb is to wait 2 weeks before following up, unless, of course, a specific timeline has been provided. Last on our agenda is dealing with nerves. It is completely normal to be nervous before your interview. Job interviews are stressful by nature. We'll review some techniques to help you relax and stay focused. First, visualize a successful performance. Visualizing the desired interview outcome can help you perform well. It's a technique used by many professional athletes. You may picture yourself shaking the interviewer's hand after the interview and feeling confident and like you did a great job. Second, be sure to get a good night's sleep. Try to do a relaxation exercise the night before, the morning of, and right before the interview. Deep breathing can also be tremendously effective. It can be effective in calming both the mind and the body. On the day of the interview, avoid excess caffeine, which can make you feel even more jittery. Next, be overly prepared. Remember to thoroughly research the company to help you feel really on top of things. Prepare your stories and examples ahead of time that speak to the employer's needs. Practice a lot. Practice with your career coach, your friends, or your family, and at your career center. The good news is that interviewing is a learned skill. The more you practice, the better interviewer you're going to become. You will get ample opportunities to practice and hone in on your interviewing skills during your Modern Guild program. You'll also start to feel more comfortable and confident in talking about yourself. Finally, during the interview, be sure to listen carefully and don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you need it. Try your best to be in the moment and be yourself. The employer wants to get to know you. There are many additional interview resources available to you. First, I'd encourage you to check out the interview guide, which can be found in the Modern Guild Knowledge Center. This will provide additional interview tips and also sample questions to help you with your interview preparation. In both the immersion and acceleration phases, you'll be engaging in live mock interviews and have the unique opportunity to get personalized feedback on your interview strengths and development areas from your career coach. During your Modern Guild program, you're also welcome to practice role-playing interview questions with your career coach, or ask your career coach if you need clarification on any of the material covered in this workshop. Also, check out your Career Center for additional online resources or workshop offerings. And as we covered earlier, connect with professionals in the field to get tips on becoming an attractive candidate. Industry professionals can also give you that insider's perspective on interviewing norms in the field. I hope this workshop has helped you feel more prepared to be successful in your next interview. Best of luck in all your future interviews. Thank you.